Thank you so much, Vas, and good luck with the dissertation, Nick. That's great. And good evening, Gordon. I guess it's evening in Singapore, right?
Yes, Michael, it's about just after 10 p.m. So, we're always used to this. And always here in Asia, we're always doing it late at night. You get it in the morning, and in the US, and Europe gets halfway in between.
That's true. And thank you for sharing your insights by using LinkedIn as a teaching tool with us. And just as an introduction to our attendees, I just want to welcome Gordon Perchthold. I believe he's the Associate Professor of Strategic Management at the Singapore Management University. And in fact, I must admit, when I first saw SMU, there's a SMU Southern Methodist University here in Dallas where I live. So I thought maybe you were doing some kind of an international program with Southern Methodist University until I looked further at the Lee Kong Chian School of Business. So that kind of threw me off for a little bit. But I certainly apologize for not being able to attend the previous session. There was one on December 10th that kind of set the stage for today's presentation. And I think Dr. Perchthold may be able to share some of the notes, the recording from the December 10th session. He's been graceful to share the notes with me this morning. I appreciate that. And but today, for those who did attend that, or even if you didn't attend the one on December 10th, today's session is primarily going to focus on LinkedIn as a teaching tool. And I think without further ado, I was going to let Dr. Perchthold tell us a little bit about this. In fact, Dr. Perchthold, perhaps you could start by sharing your inspiration for delivering the course content through the LinkedIn posts.
Okay, so let's look at the sequence of discussion we've had over these past 2 weeks.
Yes.
It actually really started with LinkedIn, and I'll tell you about the inspiration of that. And then I created the book out of it. So we've done it in a bit reverse, but I think my course is basically as most IB courses are. It's quite complex knowledge. Most people understand the home market, but when you go having to do business across cultures, cognitions, different market systems, it gets quite complex. So that's one aspect I cover. The other aspect I cover is around the internationalization process. And the third aspect is the relationships and the roles amongst the corporate office, regional office, countries and the country subsidiaries and the expats of a multinational. So that's all the content. And within that, we run X culture doing it. So it's quite complex knowledge, and it's not easy to transfer that knowledge. Now, here we are. I teach final year business students. And I normally do this through face-to-face using debates and a variety of mechanisms and the experiential learning of X culture. And now we have COVID. And we have to teach online. And we know that, trying to move from a teacher-centric, from a student-centric environment to basically online is very much teacher-centric. It's going to be hard to transfer that knowledge. And most students don't, you can assign them reading, and most students, as we know, do not read the assigned articles, the case studies, the books. They just wing it. Most students, as many of we are, we have short attention spans. We're into a social media environment. And so I thought, well, maybe I should actually, if I do, our classes are 3 hours in length. If I try to hold a Zoom call for 3 hours, 3 hours, the students, over 13 weeks, they're not going to pay attention. Yeah. So the impetus was really, how do I introduce the content of this course and maintain their attention over basically 13 weeks of 3 hour Zoom calls? And I said, that's impossible. And we know from the research, and I'm going to see if I can share my screen here. Let's see if I put this one up. Can you see that, Michael?
Yes. Yeah.
So this actually comes from one of my posts. You can see here. But it was really discussing at this stage. This was 7 weeks in. The way it was set up is the students versus the world. The students were winning 6-1. But this post talked about the learning process. And as we know, just lectures, the retention, the absorption of knowledge is only about 5%. Reading is still low. It's, when we get to practice doing, which is really what X culture is doing, that's experiential learning. It's up to 75%. So I was trying to figure out, how do I get the students engaged? So the LinkedIn is a process that basically engages students more actively in the process. So let me put on this one. So you covered the inspiration, and that was really what drove it. And I thought I'd go next into the results. Okay, and so we're seeing how well I can do this. Okay, so if my screen is still being shared, I presume. Let me do the structure first. So the structure of the course was really the business context, then going into strategy and the organization. If you can see my screen, you can see I went across from basically 13 weeks. And the various topics. It's all IB topics. Okay. Okay. So over that period. And I'm trying to see here. I'll keep going through here. And the response was quite positive from the students. Actually, I'll go over here. Let's see. If you can see, this is with my book, and I just took some of the compliments from the book. But some of the students, like basically Jamie, growing up in Singapore, being Asian herself, she thought she had a good understanding of Asia. However, she learned about Asia through the delivery of content on the LinkedIn.
Wow.
And it's sort of, even I had Andrew Parker from PwC. He also participated in the course. So recognize that what I did was actually distribute content through LinkedIn, and it was visible to the students as well as to the industry people. So students, you know how you bring in a guest speaker? Well, now the guest speakers are contributing on LinkedIn.
That's fantastic. Yeah.
So if I go back to here. So the results, let me just give you some of the results, and I'll pick this up. So in the end, we had 140 posts, 2,200 comments, 400,000 views of those and predominantly of people in the industry. So this is now engaging students with the industry people. The majority of students felt it was, the majority of student comments, they were extremely well considered, informative, and it actually positioned with the industry people that, hey, these final year students are actually quite strong. They know their content. The students themselves, they improved their LinkedIn profile. In some of the job interviews, some of them said it gave them a point of discussion because they were contributing to the LinkedIn posts, and they could talk about it with their prospective employer. So basically, about we did some direct polls, and the students felt about 40% of the students felt that it actually helped them with their job search as well.
Wow.
So there was it was quite an interesting process, a beneficial process. So let's talk about that process.
Yeah, and also maybe the anatomy.
Yeah, jump in, because I may go away.
Go
ahead.
Yeah, I think maybe Gordon, you can also share some of the details on the anatomy of the LinkedIn post and then the process for delivery.
Okay, so if we look at a LinkedIn post, let me pick up one of these here. Actually, I'll pick up, no, I don't want to pick up that one. I'm going to go through, I'll pick some up. No, okay, so we'll pick one up here. I got to move this on my screen. You can still see my screen, presumably?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
So when you do a LinkedIn post, you allow 1,300 characters and one image. So what you see is approximately 1,300 characters. The idea is to take a specific concept from international business, and I had 140 different concepts. And it was basically, you started off with a question, because when you open up LinkedIn, it actually only shows the 3 lines. So an executive will see the first 3 lines that you see here. In this case, how does an MNC's administrative structure help or impede the flow of knowledge? Okay. And then you basically consolidate the concept into 1,300 characters, as you can see here. And you end up with a question. And that's what the students respond to. So I see in this one, I have 6 comments. And you could see Ashwin, he talks about Microsoft's administrative structure, the aspect of the model. So he actually did some research on Microsoft. And you can see there's some reference to that. And that's important because the students actually were graded relative to their participation, as well as did they reference some other materials. So you can see how they did that. And there's more comments. And there's a post prior to that. Okay. So each post contains 1,300 characters and an image. The image is a JPEG. In this case, you can see it's tends to show relationships. And in this, we're showing the relationships between the categories of knowledge and what facilitates the flow of knowledge. Okay. This was later in the course, so it's a bit more complex. Here was one, did I have one early in the course? No, I've lost that one early in the course. I'm just looking. Oh, okay. So I have these 140 posts that I created one by one. You have to build a scaffolding for that over the full range of the course. Now remember, I was going over 13 weeks. There was a post every day of 1 to 3 posts that students had to read, and if they chose to comment on. Okay. So every week, every 7 days a week, there were posts over the 13 weeks. So it's quite a lot of content being covered that students would see, as well as people in industry. I would preload the posts once a week, and I would use a program called buffer.com. Okay, so and I would tend to have the posts go live at 6:30 a.m. I'm in Singapore, 6:30 a.m., 8:30 a.m., and 11:30 a.m. That would hit Australia about 3 hours later, and back in New York about 12 hours before, so their evening, which had a relatively good response rate. Obviously, I'm not getting up every day for a 6:30 a.m. post, so that's why I use buffer.com. Where it allows you to pre-schedule your posts, as many as you want if you pay the description for it. Otherwise, the free version, you can only do 10 posts at a time. The course was front-end loaded with posts. So because of X culture, I want the students to get as much knowledge as they can. You can see we really talked about the business context of Asia, principles and opportunities of international business, the explorer of Asia's vast diversity. So we talked about various countries. There's 48 countries, 3 territories in Asia, and there was discussions. We had, in that 1 week, we had 19 posts. So a lot of front-ended work talking about the culture and cognitions of the various countries and the market economies, how they varied. Because a lot of that fed into when they were doing their X culture exercise. So I wanted to make it front-end loaded. It's also, students tend to have less or fewer assessments in the first half of a term relative to the second half. So So the first half of the term, I would have maybe 19 posts in the week. Second half of the term, I would only have 6 posts in the week. Recognizing that they're having to spend time potentially every day, I left it up to them. They can actually address all the posts on the day before the class every week, or they can address the post every day. But our normal 3-hour classes was reduced to about 90 minutes to 2 hours. Recognizing they're spending another hour, an hour and a half responding to the posts during the week. Recognizing that there's no way they would last for 3 hours. And the classes turned from trying to deliver content to a discussion amongst the students that here are the 10 to 15 posts you had over the past week. What type of clarification do you want about the posts? Let's explore some of the comments and some of the posts and concepts in some more depth. So rather than them, in class, you may introduce 20, 30 concepts, slides over the course of a class, which is quite difficult for students to capture and absorb and write down. In this case, they actually had 1 to 3 posts every day. So I called it spoonfuls of knowledge that they could read, absorb, and comment on. I found there was a correlation between the participation in terms of commenting on posts and the final grade. It was a 76% correlation. They received 15% credit for participation. And most students felt it was a more equitable form of participation than the normal face-to-face class participation, where the extroverts are, the first to put up the hand, rattle off a comment, unclear whether it was high value or low value. In this case, students could actually reflect on the concept that was discussed. The 1,300 characters gave them all the detail that they didn't have to write down. They actually could capture that and retain that for the quiz or as they reviewed it for the X culture, or we had another assessment on an MNC analysis on the internationalization process.
Right. Gordon, one question that came up based on your reference to buffer.com, one of the chat questions was from Zidane. Zidane asked, did you use buffer.com to track student participation, or you did this manually?
Okay, so my TAs basically tracked the participation, and they were basically, the student would get 0 credit if they didn't participate on the post. And it was communicated they didn't have to comment on every post. They should be selective on which ones they felt they actually had a general perspective on. So contributing or just acknowledging the post and making some comment, they got 1 mark. Giving a considered perspective about a post resulted in 2 marks. If they actually referenced some external source material to support their argumentation, they got 3 marks. So basically my TAs had a spreadsheet, and they would just go through the LinkedIn, and they would see who contributed. This one is, I'll tell you about this one in a sec. Let me find a post with a lot of contribution. I'm just going to go to a LinkedIn here. Let me grab this one. Oh, this was, okay, sorry, not a good one. Yeah, I'm just gonna go here. Oh, here's one on expats. So you can see there's 19 comments. And my TAs would just go in, and Zoe would, you go in, read the comment, and they would given us a grade on that. Um, high tech or author, same thing. So they would go through the range of posts and grade them. You notice G1, G2, I had two sections that I was teaching. So I asked the students to always put G1 or G2 in front of their comment to make it easier for the TAs to pick up whose was whose, which section a comment referred to.
That's a great idea.
This also proved helpful. Occasionally, so this is on my personal directory, my personal LinkedIn profile. So occasionally I would have a commentary not to the class, and they were told anytime you see a GP, my initials, colon, as the, they didn't have to, that was to the broader audience, and they didn't have to comment.
Gotcha. So Gordon, how did you encourage the student participation in commenting on LinkedIn posts?
Well, so it was 15% of the grade, which seemed to incentivize, I would say, about 75% of students, 70 to 75%. There were some students that weren't highly engaged. After the first quiz, I actually fed back to the students their level of participation, who was in the first quartile, second quartile, third quartile, and fourth quartile. So the students knew where they were relative to those that were participating more. I also contributed, it was evident at that time, the class average went up 10% relative to my previous 6 terms of teaching this course on the first quiz. So there clearly was a retention benefit from those, and there was a correlation between those that contributed to the posts and their quiz grade, and then up to the overall grade as well. So even though it was only 15%. So by the first quiz, the students were actually getting more and more engaged. But it wasn't too bad. The students are used to using social media. There were a few students that didn't want to participate, and you have that with any exercise, any assessment exercise that, like even like class participation. And I had one student that didn't participate all term, and they got 0. As it's 0 to 15. And their marks, so they weren't obviously as energized and motivated to participate.
Okay. And I think more importantly, this particular platform is something they could benefit from in their professional career going forward, because LinkedIn is a great tool for networking, in addition to, of course, be used for coursework. But I'm just curious, Gordon, what might be some of the challenges that you encountered in using LinkedIn for teaching?
Well, some universities have constraints on the professors in terms of using social media platforms. In my case, at SMU, so I'm a practice professor, so we have a research teaching and practice faculty. All of us have to do research and publications, but with different weightings. Part of my assessment is how well do I help SMU engage with industry. Okay, so there wasn't really an issue with me using the platform to support my teaching. It does help if you have a large following. So I have, you can see on here, 4,521 followers. Probably 200 of those, maybe 250 are students, and the rest are industry personnel, which means that there would be good engagement from industry, seeing what students at SMU are posting in the commentary. And it also helped in terms of students securing or getting asked by some industry people to be considered for employment. But you do need a large network to do that. So that can be a challenge. The other challenge is I like to get a PDF of all the comments. And it's a bit tedious. So if you notice here, I'm having every once in a while to hit see more. Okay. So if you'll have lots of comments, I have to load comments. So it would take me about an hour to basically, for every week, I would actually make a PDF printout, print a PDF of all the comments. Now, it would help in terms of being able to subsequently grade it. It gave me a record. So if students query on afterwards, I had a record. I also considered I may want to use some of this for research. You know, I have a huge reservoir of data, of student commentary about various concepts that I may want to consider for some research posting purposes at some point. I may draw from some of the comments on the future refinement to my book to illustrate it. It was helpful that students would actually come up with literature that I never reviewed before related to an IB concept. And I said, oh, okay, this is a different perspective. It gave me something else to look at. So you're basically, it's crowd researching, right? And you're getting the students to do this research on your behalf on various concepts. And sometimes I had some frameworks where I had a list, and I want to see, was I holistic and comprehensive? Students would come up with other ideas that I hadn't considered originally. So it was quite beneficial from that part.
Interesting.
One other thing, recognize that your LinkedIn posts are public. So number one, you got to moderate it in case you have anyone put up comments that are rather adverse or inappropriate. I didn't have any of that, but I was aware I had to do that. Your IP is out there, right? So you've now released. So my IP, now I have taken it and I'll put it all into a book, which is now published on Amazon, but you do have to be aware of that.
Right. Zidane actually asked a related question, like, did you find individuals outside your class engage in your discussion posts?
Oh, yeah. So I saw from PwC, from a couple consultancies, some industry people, AIG, and from different parts of the world. Okay. They tended to be more, Singapore, I would say, was the highest, then Australia, then elsewhere around Asia, and then Europe, I would say, where there were comments. And the students really do appreciate the industry people giving a bit. So the industry people, they're busy, recognized. So they're probably not, you know, out of 2,200 comments, probably about only 200 of them were the actual industry people. Their comments tend to be a bit shorter, but once in a while they also give, well, here's the reality in industry, here's what's really happening, which the students really appreciate.
Excellent. Just a related question to that, Gordon, would be how, in that case, I guess your teaching assistants or graduate assistants would have to, I guess, make sure the people they are grading are only the students and not the others outside of class. Right? Yeah,
but so that's what a G1, G2. They know. So I had 72 students, so so 36 on average for each one. Okay. But this one, I don't know if this one had an industry person, but the industry person's name would pop up, so you know you're not grading them. I would also I also audited the TAs in terms of their sort of a grading assessment, particularly at the beginning, just so I knew I had it right. But basically 144 posts, so there were 144 columns times 32 students, and basically did that student make a comment, what grade did they get that week, and then it all rolled up.
Excellent. All right. Gordon, what might be the steps going forward with this?
Well, subsequent to the course. So one of the nice things is so it does take some time to actually think about, well, how am I going to deliver this course? How am I going to break it down into posts and, and a number of posts per week? How do I consolidate, the reservoir of IB knowledge into 1,300 characters? So you got to be pretty concise. You got to do quite a bit of editing. And then, so I have all this content. I personally took it and put it into a book. And that's how I created the Kindle book. You add some supplemental content into it, but it actually gives you a good, basically the core of a book that you can then publish, which is what I did on Kindle. I'm going to replicate it. I'm going to do this again. So even though we're moving from online, so Singapore only has had 0 cases for about 2 months now.
That's excellent.
Yeah, the odd 1 or 2. There's cases coming in when they fly in. They capture them and they go in quarantine. So we're going into face-to-face mode back again. I will continue to this term to distribute it through LinkedIn. And I expect the engagement around the clarification of concepts and discussion within the class to be a bit more dynamic. I found doing it through Zoom, you can't see the eyeballs of everyone at the same time, so it's hard to have that same level of engagement. I expect the class engagement to go up. But I'm raising the participation rate to 20% for LinkedIn participation. I think it's the active learning aspect of delivering a lot of complex knowledge, increase the retention, absorption of that knowledge, help the students to get in front of industry, beef up their LinkedIn profile, and let industry people see a bit about what we teach and the concepts. And generally, when you're talking IB, most of the executives in these multinationals, actually, they've never had an international business course. They're all older, and they had their strategy course, which really talked about a single country strategy. Whereas when you're doing international business, it's about multi-country strategies. And they've never had, so, I tell my students, they probably know more about international business and how to run a multinationals than their bosses will, but be careful, don't tell them
that. Thank you, Gordon. In fact, I just had a question, and I'm going to invite all our 24 participants. If you have questions, you're welcome to either type it in the chat, or you could, I don't know if you're able to raise your hand there. So I don't know how you would alert me or Gordon that you have a question. So that's the reason I've suggested maybe just typing it in the chat, and I'll be happy to pass that on to Gordon. Gordon, while they're thinking of the question, I had one. When you're doing this face-to-face next semester, the spring, how would this compare to, say, using a learning management system, say, like Canvas, Blackboard, Desire to Learn, or Moodle, or any of these other LMSs?
Yeah. So I sort of, I experiment with the Wall Street Journal, having a platform there. We do have blogging on our learning management system. But I found this to be, the students found it more engaging because it involves the real world, the outside world, industry people. So you don't have that privacy. So I think the learning management system, if you want to do it on a private mode, you use a learning management system and just start using the blogs there. But if you wanted to actually have students start engaging, and I'm teaching final year students, and I'm trying to get them to understand how they're going to need to change their behaviors as they go in industry and to help them with that transition. And part of that is through LinkedIn. Part of that is seeing commentary from industry people. So I think it's a bit more real, a bit more live for them. So I think you could replicate it and make it private, but it's not going to have the same impact as doing it using LinkedIn, particularly since students already are familiar with the platforms. And you know how some students, I think they like to be visible out there. That's why you have with the Instagrams and the Facebooks, and TikTok. They actually like to engage in that type of media.
Right, that's definitely true. In fact, another question here comes in from Ying Yang. He asks, or I guess, not sure he or she, but Ying asks, so to start with, an instructor needs to have a premier LinkedIn first and a list of questions to post every day to engage students. And how do you bring industrial professionals in to participate?
So you don't need to have premium. I'm not premium. You do have to plan out your course. Now, all of us have slides from teaching in class. So I started off with that, taking my slides, looking at what topic do I want to make sure I cover each week. How many posts would that take to cover those concepts? I actually found I actually reduced the number of slides that I would normally cover in a class.
Wow.
So you start off with that. 1,300 characters and the image. The image, so this is, you can see this image here where it's, so it's almost like a bullet point. It's a numbered list. They don't get as much attention as graphics. So you saw I had some graphics in my post. Almost all my posts was a graphic that I used in class that showed relationships, and like bar charts, line charts, anything that shows relationships gets a lot more engagements in terms of views, because these views go across an executive's desk as they're looking at LinkedIn, and graphics capture their attention. Bullet points don't capture their attention. And I don't like bullet points because to me those are more like memorization, and I'm trying to get students to understand absolute data means nothing. It's all about the relationships between data that are important. And so you got to think about how you bring that in. Now, what I did in this first round, a week before before class started, I sort of started doing some teasers to industry people. It's going to be the SMU students versus the world. Who knows multinationals better? Who knows how to do international business better? So I did that for about 5 days. And then my classes were on Wednesday and Thursday. So I started the posts on Monday, Tuesday. So students, they didn't participate yet. But when I had my first class, I said, you've seen the posts. This is what they look at. Like, this is what you need to comment on.
Gotcha.
So it's just like any course you create. Except I took an existing course managing across Asia, and I just refined it for the LinkedIn environment. But it was a prep. It was another course prep. So it does take some time. The benefit is I have all those posts. I'm going to just replicate them. I have a book. The students are, I will make it optional. If the students want to buy the book, that's fine. But they're going to get all the posts on the LinkedIn. But some students may want to have that, have the book to reference, particularly as they go towards assessments. And the book's is in Kindle form, ebook form, or they can get the physical book.
Okay. And I think Ole says hi, Gordon. Ole Leskiv. And Ole says, well, as I see, you need to have developed enough LinkedIn profile to use this tool for teaching and research effectively. I guess that's accurate, correct? You would have to develop.
That is. It does help to have a LinkedIn profile. It does take time to build that up. Some universities may have a good external network, or the executive ed. You may be able to leverage there. So you may be able to use one of their LinkedIn profiles. So you may want to see in the university. But it does. It helps me in terms of engaging with industry. I teach capstone, so I usually get a couple ex-culture clients for VAS.
Right.
This is how I do it. I also teach design of business. I oversee all the capstone here. So it also helps me get clients for the design thinking courses.
That helps. And this is one question I had on my mind too, but I think Gene Yes beat me to it. Gene Yes asked, what happens next time when you use this same course again for MNCs? Because you see all the slides, posts, and images are already on LinkedIn. So would those students have access to the posts, and would that influence their thinking?
Yeah, students could actually potentially go back, but they also see each other's posts during the term as well. It didn't seem to matter because they always had to try to find a unique point of view. Now you could say, are they just going to copy past? So we're going to have some plagiarism. That's why I wanted to get PDFs of all the posts, so I can actually upload that and turn it in, and then we can potentially be able to identify that. At least that's what I'm going to tell my students. And I'm working with LinkedIn. I need to make it a simpler process for academics to get the full complement of posts that to draw from that we could upload.
Right. So, Gordon, is there a limit to the size of these posts? And then also, is there a tool you use to check for, similar to Turnitin or some other tool, to kind of go through the volume of these posts to check for similarities, if you will?
Okay. So to recognize, it's always in 1 week cycles. So my classes were, let's for a point of our argumentation, let's say my classes are on Thursday. I tell students every week, I'll have my Thursday class. They have up to midnight the night before to comment on the post, and then there's no more credit. Because my TAs, you can keep commenting. I got to put a closer every week, and so you could see there's a topic of every week. So there could be probably 100 comments. You'll go through, you'll recognize if there's any replication of commentary. Most of the students are drawing from different sources, different perspectives. We didn't actually identify any replication.
That's good.
So, now the Singaporean students, remember, they're all trying to get A grades. So they're all quite keen. I did not. So I'm going to be interested this term to see if I can identify anyone copying from last term's comments, because that's, in theory, there is an opportunity for that. But that's why I'll probably do some sampling on. I'll put 1 or 2 weeks of PDF of commentary into Turnitin and run it against another PDF of a current series. It will take a bit of work. Or I'll take my TAs a bit of work to do that.
Okay. And let me check. I think there's another post that just came in. Also Genius asks if you will you have the slides deleted? I guess I'm guessing, is that for the next term, or would these slides be deleted for the, no, they stay on. Okay.
Yeah, they stay on. So the reality is, it gets so buried so far deep that it's going to take a lot of effort for someone to, if they're trying to copy anything, look in the back. And this, putting it out there with my executives, people in the industry, they don't see every post. So I would think maybe in a couple of years it's going to be getting a bit long in the tooth. But every term I'm going to add some more posts. I'll add some more content. I may remove some posts. Some posts, like I start off my course off with a few posts on the state of globalization, internationalization. That varies every term, right? The way the world goes. So the content will change. From time to time, probably about 20% of content will change every term.
Mm-hmm.
I find it quite engaging to say, let me look at the history of Korea and Japan. What's the common theme I can bring out in 1,300 characters? So if you go through my posts, you'll see all of that come out. So the idea be that China has been a homogeneous country since 2021 BC, whereas India, it never became a consolidated entity until 1957, 57.
47, it got the independence.
Yeah. And so so India is a huge amount of diversity. It's challenging to get them to move in one direction compared to China. and I brought out some of that discussion in the, when you talk about China versus India and their impact on Asia and the influence and the ability of China to basically exert its influence around the region. And what are the historical roots to that? So if anyone wants to watch my course, they just have to connect to me on LinkedIn if they want to see it. So I'll be starting it up on the 11th of January. And they could see it play out over the term.
I guess from the Singapore Management University's administration standpoint, are they concerned about enrollment, given if this is available on LinkedIn and they can get this education? Granted, they won't have the transcript and the degree diploma, but does this concern the administration? Just curious.
No. So this is a final year undergraduate course. The SMU is maximum capacity.
Right.
Now, so SMU, it's basically its own. Now you have to remember Singapore is a bit different. It's basically for Singaporean students only, plus exchange students. Okay. So we don't have like in the US where a huge complement of international students come in at the undergraduate level. At the graduate level, we do have about a 30% complement of the 35% complement of international students. So there isn't that restriction. I do teach doing business in Asia at a master's level. It's a blended learning course. The content's a bit different, and some of those students could probably pick up on it. But there isn't really a concern about, so that's where you could have some cannibalization. Undergraduate level, not a concern. Graduate level, hypothetically, that could be an issue at some point. I think it's a good problem to have. We don't have a big international business program, so it's not as big an issue here.
Okay, that's good to know. Now, Gordon, just curious, I think in your email you mentioned there was going to be subsequent webinars to this. Did I understand that correctly? Were there additional topics that we will cover maybe in the next few weeks?
No. So we had the webinar last week to discuss about Kindle. So how did I take all these posts and move it into a book? Because most of us, as you know, have published books through the traditional book channel, where you get 3 to 5% commission. That's not really the issue. It's really the logistics of working to a publisher. The Kindle process was really easy. Your commission rate's much higher. So my book, the ebook is $35. The print book's is $70. And both books I get about a $15 commission per book.
That's the way the model is set up, yeah. But this is, I think, thank you for sharing that, Gordon. And I really think that seems a bit skewed. But nevertheless, your books are priced very reasonably.
Yeah. I wanted them to be accessible. And the idea is I don't look as a book as a money-making venture. So that's, I look at it as it's more of a glorified business card.
That's a good way to look at that. Gordon, any words of wisdom, advice for those venturing into this, trying to do this on LinkedIn or other social media platform, just based on your lessons learned?
Yeah, well, one, you got to get familiar with LinkedIn and start building up a following. And it may be a good way for you to actually start building up an industry following by going through the process, and eventually you get people wanting to connect with you. I found it to be a relatively painless process, particularly because I could use Buffer. I didn't have to get up at 5:30 in the morning, and I could pre-schedule everything.
Right.
Yeah, I would say experiment with it. So, by the way, I didn't just start this at the beginning of last term. The term before, and it was more just, let's see how this works. I actually did a slide of the week on LinkedIn. So I only did one slide, and I posted it on LinkedIn as slide of the week. I encourage my students to comment on it, and some of them did. but it wasn't graded. And I had industry people come out. And so I saw the integration taking place. So that was my trial. And then when basically we were forced to do online, I said, I can just do this. So I had tested it. So I would say just test it out yourself. Do it, every week you usually do your face-to-face, you do your presentations in class. Pick one of the slides that you think are impactful, that you think industry would find interesting, and do it as slide of the week. And see what the response is like. And it gives you that practice.
Great. Now, for the students, was there any that felt that this was, I know you did say that they like to be on social media, but were there any that might have opposed that or felt that was, they didn't want to be posting in public for whatever reasons, perhaps professional reasons, somebody in their organization might not be happy that they had shared that, perhaps something that was a dysfunction of the organization. Did you run into that situation at all?
No, I didn't experience that. Now, students, maybe because I'm the prof, didn't want to bring up that they didn't want to do it. There was a certain segments, so basically around, I have the figures here, I can't remember, but it was about 70% of students, I think, were 66% of the students found it beneficial. They enjoyed the process. 30% weren't so keen. You could see that that's about the 30% were the ones that whose grades were a bit lower too. Because when you do the LinkedIn posts, it requires you to first read the post. When you have to give a comment, then you got to actually consider what's your perspective about that. If you actually reference another source, then you say, well, I got to search them. Some of them search the IB literature and come up with literature and reference it, either supporting what was posted, or some of them disagreed with what was posted, and that was fine. So I didn't have any students come up and object, and they already are engaging with social media, so it's probably something. I think it's more of a challenge for professors. Because we're all older.
Right. Okay, the reason I asked is because I think sometimes when we are discussing issues, challenges, risks, some might feel that was proprietary. At least I teach strategic information systems, which goes into global information systems, and some are not able to share that in a public forum. I thought they would email me, but not put it even on a Canvas that we use, Canvas learning management. They thought, well, what if a competitor is in the class and then uses that as a strategy against this organization, and then HR would be upset with this issue being brought up. Those are some challenges that come up. But I think that's good that you didn't encounter that.
There was some edgy stuff. Particularly but it tended to be, vacillating commitments. Multinationals that have engaged in Asia, then withdrawn. And some multinationals were called out for that, like ANZ Bank. New York Life was once in Asia. So some of them were called out. There were some examples where we would disguise the multinational, not refer to them. So there was comparing two multinationals, one that did well in Asia and another one that blew about $1 billion of shareholder value.
Yeah, that was in a derivatives trade, I remember.
And on countries too. Basically Australia has not done well in Asia. It underperforms. It's not as well on resources, but in terms of internationalizing, basically setting up production and sales operations across the region as a multinational, they've done really poorly. And in many respects, if you look at the Harvard Complexity Index, Australia looks like a third world country in terms of its export composition. And that was discussed as part of the rollouts. And you'll see that again this term. So we're not as have as many lawyers out here as there are in the U.S.
Well, I think no, that's a good point. Gordon, I don't see any further questions, but I do want to, appreciate and let you know that sharing this has been certainly a change for me. I mean, I had not considered LinkedIn as a platform for this, but I think I would certainly be looking at that now after listening to your presentation as a potential a means to just most importantly, the takeaway for me was getting the external participation from experts outside of my classroom, which would be so important to that discussion. Just like you mentioned, bringing in guest speakers. I think that element right there would be very, very helpful. And then maybe even inviting, because somebody might not know that we were having this discussion, inviting some experts to bear in on that particular concept, that would be helpful. I think that's been very good. Thank you for mentioning that.
Yeah, Michael, and I would actually, sometimes I knew some consultants or industry people, and I would send a message to them, just because engage because it's beneficial for the students as well.
Right. And then the A's. Oh, sorry, I was going to say the asynchronous medium that helps because they don't have to be at this, same time, same place. They could do this at their convenience sometime during that week. I mean, that when we are discussing that concept.
Correct.
Yeah. All right. Well, I just checking to make sure I didn't miss any questions, but I think that's all I see at the moment. And want to thank you for your time. And I think Was is probably still in that dissertation defense. So I'm sure he'll be seeing the recording and hopefully he'll have comments or questions later.
Yeah, Pete, you can always send me questions on LinkedIn.
Yeah, that's true. That'll certainly be a good way to participate. So again, I want to thank all the participants for their time and questions. And Gordon, have a wonderful evening there in Singapore. And appreciate your insights today.
Thank you. Thank you. Take care.
Bye-bye.